You're listening to The Power Project. I'm your host, Brandy Voth. I also like to think that I'm your guide along this journey of purpose, which is where you will hopefully end up at the end of this podcast. I'm a mom, a wife, a daughter, a friend, an entrepreneur, an advocate in the fight against human trafficking. I wear a lot of hats, y'all, but don't we all? And most importantly, I am passionate about inspiring women to go out and lead purpose-filled lives while owning your God-given power. I have this crazy belief that we are all better when we lift each other up, which is exactly why I created this platform to spotlight other women that are leading in ministry, business, and nonprofits in the hopes that you at home will be inspired by their stories to get up and take action in order to walk in purpose and own your God-given power. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Welcome back to The Power Project. My guest today is a gal that I've had the privilege to get to know in one of those Facebook groups that you guys know I am such a huge fan of. I've met some of the coolest people by hanging out in some Facebook groups and finding people that have similar interests, like-minded individuals that have really incredible stories to share. So today, my guest, Jackie Costello, is a social entrepreneur, a podcast host. She's a boutique owner with a fair trade boutique. And she recently had me on her podcast, the Fairlosophy podcast. So you guys give a great big welcome to my guest, Jackie. Hey, Jackie, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And by the way, I really love having other podcast hosts on the show because it's really cool to have someone that knows the inner workings of what goes on to actually produce an episode and what it looks like, and someone that knows that it's totally cool if you cough or sneeze, we can cut that little bit out. So yeah, thanks for hopping on. I had a great time chatting with you the other day. That was super fun, and I'm excited to really share your story with my listeners and let them get to know you over on this side. So tell us a little about who you are, what you have going on, and anything that you would like to share with the listeners.
Absolutely. My name is Jackie Costello, and I own two businesses. I own a fair trade boutique called The Golden Rule, and currently we're based in San Diego, but we are in transition and are likely to be moving out of state. With my husband, we just have some exciting news that we're going to be moving. So we don't know where yet.
You don't know where yet. That's what I was going to ask. Yeah. Like, are we going to do a big reveal here on the show?
Depending on, when this airs, we might know in the next couple weeks, but we're still trying to figure that out. And so it's a very exciting time, but a bit of a transition as well. And then I also own an occupational therapy early intervention company called OccuPath. And again, we're based here in San Diego. We do early intervention through the San Diego Regional Center, and we have 4 or 5 therapists besides myself underneath me. And then, work with kiddos 0 to 3 within the home. And it's just a ton of fun. I love it. And then we have the podcast. So my co-host, Jen Parlin, and I host the podcast, Fairlosophy podcast, and it's all about fair trade fashion, but everything that's related to it. So that's why we had you on the podcast, because we talk about, human trafficking, sustainability, ethics, and everything that's related to slowing down fashion.
So tell me, how do you take I myself am a serial entrepreneur, multifaceted with my husband, and I have a wide range of businesses, but I always kind of like to see what is the drive or the connecting force, so you're an occupational therapist over here where you're working with kids 0 to 3. And then where from there did you decide that you also wanted to create this fair trade boutique?
Yeah, it's a great question, because there so totally different.
Yeah.
But I went to school for occupational therapy. I have my master's in occupational therapy and graduated, started working. And even when I first started working, I had multiple jobs. Always had my hands in a lot of things while I was studying for my test. Even I was, working 3 jobs, teaching tumbling and coaching soccer and working as a secretary, and just had my hands in a lot of things. But as I continued to work, I loved what I was doing, but felt that I was being pulled. I felt like I had a bigger purpose than being an occupational therapist. And again, I loved and still love being an occupational therapist, but felt like there was more for me, like that, as Rachel Hollis would say, that I was made for more. Mm-hmm. So I was shopping for Christmas maybe 5 years ago at this point, and stumbled upon some companies that were being very transparent about fair working wages and safe working conditions. And honestly, before that, I never really thought about the people behind my products. Mm-hmm. I was naive to what was going on in the fast fashion world. And around that same time, I watched the documentary True Cost, and then it just spiraled. I just started buying books about fair trade and just wanted to learn more and just dove in. And again, we were in a different transition from moving from New Jersey to San Diego, and just kind of, again, thought that in San Diego, there would be a lot of fair trade businesses. I thought they were kind of ahead of the curve, but there wasn't. There was no fair trade fashion boutiques. And I wanted to focus on fashion. I wanted to slow down fashion and change the fashion industry. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just thought, okay, if no one else is doing it, then I will. So I started very small, doing farmers markets and events and pop-ups, things like that. And it got to a breaking point after maybe a year or so doing that. I said to the school I was working in, I'd like to transition to 4 days a week so I can focus on my business more. And there was a lot of confusion and things like that. And, someone approved it. And then after months, someone else said no. So this whole time I was preparing for that transition. And I was like, okay, then I quit. So that's when I started working and doing early intervention and home health as an occupational therapist. And I loved the flexibility of it. I love that I was able to schedule around these pop-ups and events and festivals and make my own schedule. So then it just spun into, well, I could make more money if I was just cutting out the middleman and doing it myself. So that's when February of last year, I opened OccuPath. And again, I have worked for other companies in the meantime, but then when I am working for myself, I'm making that much more money. So it helped me with this transition of opening my store as well. So that's a little bit drawn out and a lengthy response, but
no, I like that, because oftentimes people see other people's end result along their journey, and they don't realize what went into it. They see, oh, well, she has a fair trade boutique and a podcast, but they don't realize things that went in along the way, that, hey, I was working other businesses. I had, diversified my income. I had multiple streams of income. This is what I was working towards and with to achieve this dream. So I like the long drawn out versions of the answers, because it does give listeners an insight to the whole process, the whole journey.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I so often listen to podcasts or watch videos and they just kind of state, one thing after the next. And it's kind of like, but I want the details. I want the nitty gritty. How did you get there? Because it doesn't make sense to me. And there are a lot of details. And honestly, it just came because it was necessary. And I think that that's what happens with a lot of entrepreneurs. It just becomes necessary,
So I think that there was this, one of the OGs of the rise of really the girl boss, female entrepreneur, movement, in my personal opinion, is Sarah Blakely, like with Spanx.
Mm.
And there was this whole, I remember when she was first on interviews and when she was first being featured, and everyone really just viewed her as an overnight success.
Right.
And it wasn't until like last year that I finally heard a podcast where she was really telling her story, her entire story. And people were really seeing like, oh, she didn't just hit it big and, hit the jackpot with some shapewear. Like, these are the failures that went into it, the struggle that went into it, the trials. So that's always my intention to bring to the forefront is this is a journey. Nobody is doing anything overnight. It's all a process. It's all a journey. It's all learning and failing and taking chances and taking risks. And so you obviously are a risk taker.
I never thought of myself that way.
Well, though, the person that is willing to go say, hey, no one else is having a fair trade boutique in San Diego, it's going to be me. That's obviously a risk taker in my book. Yeah. And I think that's also how we learn to retrain our opinion of failure, is the willingness to take the risk and take the step out and take action to pursue our dreams. I'm curious, is your husband military, or he just has a business that moves you around a lot?
Neither.
Okay.
So we really just didn't like winters in New Jersey. And we got to this point in our relationship when we were going to move and live together. So we were kind of like, okay, well, if neither of us want to live in New Jersey, like, why don't we just figure out where we are going to live next? And he has been a surfer his whole life and had a family friend in San Diego and has always wanted to live in San Diego. So February of that year, that's 5 years ago now, we just picked up and planned a trip to San Diego and fell in love. It was 75, 80 degrees in San Diego. When we flew back to New Jersey, it was 6 degrees and blizzarding. We're like, maybe we should move to San Diego. But more recently, we have realized that we do want to be closer to our families. We have 3 nieces, and one was just born, and I haven't even met her yet because, it's so far. It's a long flight. It's time difference. It's really, really hard. So we are looking to get closer to our families, maybe not necessarily in New Jersey, but at least a shorter flight within the same time zone, et cetera.
Right.
And then also, so that's the big thing, big closer to family.
Right on. I was just curious. I was like, you kind of had all the makings of a military.
It sounds like a military family. Absolutely.
Yes, very much so. So I'm curious. I want to open up the conversation here because so many people aren't really aware of what fair trade is. And honestly, like you said, so many people are not even aware of what is going into the process of making the garments they're wearing. And I know personally with my own journey, recently with the hat company, there are so many inner workings of really researching the supply chain. And so can you go into that and share with our listeners really what it is, what it means, and what you've learned about the industry?
Well, what's crazy about it is I've been in this world for 5 years and I'm still learning so much about it. But my biggest thing, let's start with what I say to customers. So what I say to customers when they walk into the store, I say that everything in our store is doing good in the world. And that's just an easy way to say, hey, we're a bit different. And, you may not notice that right away because we just have these cool, beautiful products, but hey, we're also doing good in the world. And then as customers want to learn more, that's when I kind of say that every piece that we carry, the people behind the products are protected. Safe working conditions, no forced labor, no child labor, a fair working wage, safe working conditions. And that's really what fair trade is to me. It's kind of just what you would think people behind our products are getting, and really they aren't. So it's just kind of crazy to me. That's why it just threw my world upside down when I started learning about it, because I was like, I can't believe that all of this is happening. Like, I really just was so naive and had no idea. But that's the reality of the world we live in. And in regard to the garments, it's, again, and sourcing, it's just so complicated. We have had even just two people interviewed on the podcast about one walked into LA factories, and she was a student in I'm forgetting what school she went to. I'm sorry. But anyway, she went to the LA factories as a school project, and was just kind of seeing what was going on, and really was kind of appalled by the safety, by the working wages, by all of that. And then I interviewed somebody recently who this podcast will be airing soon, but my new friend Brian has worked in China, and he was like an intermediary for brands and factories. And he said he must have worked in 50 to 100 factories and was just so desensitized to what was going on. And eventually had to stop working because, again, he was so desensitized and realized, this is not what I want to do anymore. But even so, he had trouble, even knowing, like, this doesn't feel right, but I don't know if it's wrong. Like, is this unethical? I'm not sure. And it's just so crazy, to me, because it's like, it's really hard to dig in and find out. And we talked about how the brand and the factory really has to be working together to, not just focus on keeping costs low and not just focus on keeping wages low, and how can they work together to make a good quality product and while everyone's happy. So that's kind of like the big challenge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I completely know what you mean. And we have, it's funny because it's kind of like you're talking about, like, once you see it and once you know it, like, you can't unsee it. And when I first started learning about human trafficking, which predominantly I work with and focus with sexual exploitation and trafficking. However, labor trafficking is also another branch of that we do work with. And so my husband and I had some boat seats that we needed to have refinished, reupholstered. And so we took them down to this guy that was going to redo them down in the Metroplex. And when we walked in to like the factory area that they had, I looked at him, I'm like, they are 100% labor trafficking in here.
Oh,
like there's, and he's like, I know, but I've already given him my boat seats. What am I going to do? I'm like, I know, but I can't like not see what's going on. It's just, it's the middle of summer. There's no air conditioning, all of the employees
in Texas,
are
the middle of summer.
Yes. Texas, middle of summer, no air conditioning. It's literally a sweatshop. They're all, Asian descent and don't speak English. And it's like, oh my gosh.
That's interesting. Sorry to interrupt, but that's so interesting you mentioned the descent, because that's what Michaela, the girl we interviewed that went into the LA factories, was talking about. She was saying that in her school class, they were talking about what's typical. So it would typically be an Asian manager or person running the factory. And then typically underneath that, it would be someone of Latin descent. That would, if it's, an unethical sweatshop, etc., then that's typically what it would look like, at least in the ones that they were not investigating, but looking at that kind of thing. So it is interesting that you bring up that point because, and I know you said Asian descent for the workers, but
right.
It's like they have almost the same thing just in different factories, you know? So it's all so interesting to me. Like I can't grasp my brain around it. You know what I mean? Or wrap my head around it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that around here, what I personally see is, it's also it's a cultural barrier to overcome because, there's so many from Southeast Asia that are trafficked, and it is seen as culturally acceptable, and it's not seen as a crime. And so I know what we see, even your nail salon owners, that another, Asian, individual will bring these people over and say, I'll bring you to America and you have to work off your debt for me while you're here. And it ends up where these people that are here are like, look, I got to come to America. They gave me a house to live in. I'm working my debt off, even though they're not even coming close to receiving a living wage.
Oh
so
my God.
I know that transfers.
In nail salons too.
Yeah.
Oh
I know
God.
it transfers into the fashion industry, and it's such a large problem to tackle.
Yeah. Yep.
And it starts with people like yourself saying, hey, let's have this conversation, right? Let's talk about this. Let me tell you who makes your fabric and your garments. And for instance, you and I, you have the Guatemalan textiles that you carry in your store. I believe you have some purses made out of them.
Yep.
And those, I've researched those because I'm also using a Guatemalan fabric for my hat bands on my hats. And those are sourced from artisans. So how do you know that artisan in Guatemala that is getting a chance to receive compensation for their handwork that is being supplied to you? How do we make really sure that our overseas suppliers and our artisans that we're incorporating into our brand are really receiving a living wage and taken care of and ethically treated?
So you're asking how we are making sure that they're getting a fair working wage?
Yes.
Okay.
Like if your supplier says, here, I'm paying them this, but they're in Guatemala, is there any link there to verify that?
Yeah. So all of the brands that we work with are members of the Fair Trade Federation or the World Fair Trade Organization. And that means that they are vetted by these organizations. They have analyzed all of the inner workings of each company to make sure that they're doing what they say that they're doing. And then they're also abiding by the 10 principles of fair trade, which, is environmental awareness, fair working conditions, safe working conditions, gender equality. And then there's a few others not off the top of my head, but that's the only way that I know that I can trust these brands, because there are a lot of brands that will say, oh, we're giving fair working wages. Oh, we're doing this. We're working with artisans, and oh, it's artisan made. And, they try to use all this language to trick you. Right. But that's the only way that I will shop with a company for our store. There are other exceptions as a consumer, just because I cannot always find something. But I always say to customers, do your research. And then there are a couple apps, which of course I'm going to forget right now, but there are a couple apps that
we'll put them in the show notes.
Yes, I can find them for you for sure. That you can have on your phone, and then as soon as you're looking up a new brand, you can type it in there, and then they'll grade the brands based on their practices. And it's so hard to know, right? And you don't want to spend hours and hours, when you're shopping for something in particular, so this is a good way to just cut the work out for you. Yeah.
So I know that, and I know you being in this work are familiar with Nike's, I know that you're familiar with Nike's story back in, I believe it was the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, when the picture of the little boy, like creating a Nike football in a sweatshop, like a under 10-year-old little boy, was published and on the cover of multiple magazines. And it created this scandal that Nike had to go through and try to figure out. And at that point, when it was first brought to the forefront, Nike's like, look, we don't actually, manufacture personally the shoes. We are the brand. We sell the shoes. We have them manufactured for us. And we don't know what's happening in China. That was the first kind of response. And then they took that opportunity to pivot and to become a leading industry standard for the transparency and saying, this is what we're doing to combat child labor. And this is what we're doing to combat labor trafficking. And yes, we are sorry that we turned a blind eye to it. So
and that's kind of what a lot of the brands do. They turn a blind eye, turn a blind eye to it. And they're saying, oh, well, that's the factory's responsibility. They need to be paying them. Or that's so-and-so's responsibility. They need to do that. Well, we're not going to look into, our supply chain. We don't need to do that. And it's kind of crazy. And it's like, well, we need to make everybody responsible. So yes, I love that Nike has pivoted and is trying to make changes. And that's all we can really ask of our brands, is to do the next best thing and to continue to change and continue to pivot. So I love that you brought up that story.
Hey guys, if you've considered starting a podcast, but you're overwhelmed by how to actually launch, I've created a basics of podcasting course over on Skillshare. So you can sign up for my course and get 2 months of free premium membership. Skillshare is where I learn all types of skills that I don't know how to do otherwise. I'll include the link in the show notes. You can head over to Skillshare and search Brandy Voth's class, The Basics of Podcasting.
So what have you found personally in this journey with fair trade? What have you found has been your biggest obstacle along the way? And when is a time that you may have had to pivot?
I think our biggest obstacle at farmers markets and events and festivals was finding the right events, but also when we were at the wrong event, having people say things like, well, I don't care about that.
Yeah.
For me personally, that was really hard to hear. I'm like, well, you should care.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean you don't care about other people? What do you mean? It just got me angry. And it was really draining doing all of these events and, not getting as much as return and, setting up all these displays and everything else. And then people saying to you, well, I don't care about that. And I knew in my heart that there were people that did care about it, but hearing that at, 3 events in a row or, what have you, it was really, really hard. So our pivot in that situation was opening our brick and mortar so that we could change our marketing to have people come to us. And that way I could market to people that already know about fair trade, instead of like, we're going to be at this event, we're going to be at that event, and you're never going to find us because we're at a different place every weekend. But this way you'll know where we are all the time and you can find beautiful, ethically made products in our store all the time instead of who knows where we'll be in town, So I think that was a big pivot for us and we saw such a change. And then for me personally, I could set up everything the way I wanted to. I could create that vibe in the store that I really thought was important and I got good feedback on as well. Everyone who came in, they would know that the store was different and that they would know that there's something special that we have here. So
it's so interesting to me that your pivot that really created the environment of engaged customers was a brick and mortar store, because what we've seen recently, in the past, 5, 6, 7, 8 years has really been a decline of brick and mortar stores.
And that's what a lot of people say. But for us, you need to feel the organic cotton. You need to fall in love with this quality product. And we have always done much better in person than we do online. We've always had the website, but there's much less movement comparatively to whenever we sell in person. And I think it's that piece that you get to feel and touch and fall in love with the product and the story, and get to talk to, an employee or me and feel our passion behind it. So I think that's the difference and why we were successful in a brick and mortar.
Right. I think, these other brick and mortar stores that have had a hard time or have closed don't have the passion and the purpose behind them. And I'm not going to say that none of them have, but
right.
Like you're saying, when you have a mission that is so attached to purpose and so attached to the story, you need that story to be able to be told, and the emotion to be conveyed, and the attachment to come with the product. So I love that. I love that you have carved out a niche in your corner of the world to say, hey, we're going to do good for the world. We're going to let you fall in love with these really, really quality created products, but you're also going to learn about the people, the humanity behind it. That really gets me fired up. I love it. I've become that person that someone can come in and say, oh my gosh, look at this shirt. I got it for $7 at da-da-da. And I immediately am like, and I'm sure that some poor child in Thailand was child trafficked to create that shirt for you.
Yeah, you don't want to start a conversation with Brandy or I about how cheap your shirt was.
Correct. Yes. So now I want to move to, because you are multifaceted and you and I are cut from the same cloth with a lot of different things going on at different times. I want to move into your newest endeavor that you are working on. And if you want to tell us a little about the Entrepreneur Hot Seat and kind of your vision behind it.
Yes, absolutely. The Entrepreneur Hot Seat is going to be an online event. And for each person that participates gets a certain amount of time to state their problem in their business to the group, and then the group spitballs and comes up with solutions, and along with myself. And the vision behind this was really to create community. I have felt so much isolation working in a business and multiple businesses and having so much on my plate. I felt like a lot of other people didn't really know what I was going through. And I also didn't always know who to turn to with my questions. Someone that was maybe just 3 chapters ahead of me. And this is something that has been in the back of my head since I opened the brick and mortar, especially because so much learning was happening at once. And then since we're in transition right now, I have, a little bit of free time to actually get it off the ground, this Entrepreneur Hot Seat. So our first one is next week on the 18th at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can go to our Facebook page or our website to find out more information. But again, it's just a good way to spitball with like-minded people. And then you're going to have access to the Facebook group Mastermind that you can continue to collaborate with the people that were in your small group particularly, but also the people that continue to enter into the program. So I think I'm just really excited to help other entrepreneurs find community with other like-minded people.
I think it's amazing. And I love that you said access to the Facebook group Mastermind, because I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, it's basically a virtual mastermind.
Yep.
And it's so important. And my husband and I we're in the process of a similar creation right now, because we've created and built various businesses and find that people have quote unquote picked our brains for years.
Yep.
And so it's always, my question to you on this is, well, I have two questions on this. The first is, have you always been an entrepreneur? Were you raised by entrepreneurs? Like, where did the entrepreneurial background come from?
Yeah, my parents were cafe owners, and my dad had a couple businesses over the years. So he was kind of always whispering in the back of my ear, you know, when I was going through my clinical as an occupational therapist. I was working at a clinic in New Jersey, and he was whispering in my ear, you know, watch what they're doing. You might own a clinic one day. I was like, yeah, okay, Dad, sure. And then when I was at a secretary for our family friend's business, same thing. Watch what they're doing. You might own a business one day. I'm like, sure, Dad. And at the time, I didn't want to own a business. I was like, that's too much work, you know, but it can also create a lot of freedoms in your life. And that's what I was seeking. You know, I was seeking making my own schedule. I was seeking, you know, the ability to take time off when I want. That's really what I wanted. And in the same time, building a business with purpose, you know, so especially when someone else wasn't doing it. So yeah, my parents had a big influence in that for sure, without me realizing it.
Well, and the reason I ask is I was raised by entrepreneurs, and my husband comes from an entrepreneurial background, and we really had to dig in when building a team and teaching, you know, appointing the correct people in the correct leadership roles. We really had to dig into, how do you teach someone ownership mentality when maybe they were raised by people who worked 40 and they have the employee mentality. Because for us, it's naturally ingrained with us. You know, we get it. We know entrepreneurship, we know ownership. And so that was something I leaned into, and it's something I've really started like paying attention to. Quick story, my 8th grader has to do his career path this year. And, you know, cause you're going to know what you want to do in the 8th grade for the rest of your life. And so he comes home and he's been researching careers, and he says, I think I want to be a physical therapist. And my first response is, well, that's funny. You've never shown interest in the medical, you know, industry ever. Right. And he's like, well, I want to like maybe work with athletes and like sports therapy and sports medicine. He loves all things sports. And my husband and I are kind of, you know, spitballing him basically. And we're like, why do you want to do it? What do you like about that? And so the end of it, we're like, why don't you do an entrepreneurship course, and then you open up a physical therapy facility where you employ physical therapists, a team of them. And he's like, oh, that's cool. Or like, and then you don't have all the medical school expenses, but you get to do what it is that you're wanting to do. And so, yeah, it's funny because then they took the aptitude test where his results came back that he should be an entrepreneur.
Get out. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think it really does. A lot of it comes from like what you've seen modeled for you. And I think that's where the bug first starts. Not to say that someone not raised by entrepreneurs can't go out and start a business, but I think that is where it begins. But my second part of that question on creating this mastermind and this community to help others along the journey is, did you, like when you had this idea in your mind, did you go through a period of thinking, I'm not qualified enough to teach this to others. I still struggle with obstacles in my own business. I feel like a poser. Or did you feel completely qualified to go like create this business teaching platform for others?
Oh no, I never feel qualified, but I also feel a calling, you know. It's often, you know, these dreams and ideas and, you know, little intuitions that I have are often, you know, somebody, maybe it's my dad as an angel whispering in the back of my head, who knows, but that's God, the universe, you know, what have you. But I have a lot of ideas that I put into action. And this one, believe me, I went live, you know, 2 days ago, and I was like, nobody's going to watch this.
Mm-hmm.
And it was announcing what we were going to be doing with the Entrepreneur Hot Seat. And I said that I would be doing business consulting. But yeah, I was like, literally no one's going to watch this. And that's fine, but I'm going to do it. And, you know, obviously people did watch it. I mean, not obviously, because not a lot of people did, of course, but that was okay. And it was like, I felt a strength in the fact that I even got on and did that, because that was new for me. I don't typically go live and make announcements and launch something. I have gone live before, but it's more, you know, we have an event coming up. This is what's happening in the store. You know, we have a sale, those kinds of things. So this was a different type of bravery that I needed to create for myself. And another thing was that I really, truly believe that I have learned and grown so much in even the last 6 months of having a brick and mortar. So I think if you were just 3 chapters ahead of somebody, you really can help them, because then it's so fresh in your mind, right? You're not thinking 10 years ago. You're thinking 6 months ago. So that's really how it got started. And I was just thinking what I would want when I started. So
yeah. And I think it's so important for our listeners to listen to this, because I've struggled with this, which is why I asked you the question. And I know that everyone stepping out of their comfort zone and doing anything, whether it is podcasting, whether it is creating a business or a social enterprise or whatever, every single person that is creating something and building something is feeling not qualified on a daily basis.
Yep.
And as I've had more and more people asking, and this has been for the last year of really creation, as I've had more and more people ask about it, I just kept saying, I'm not fully where I want to be yet before I start teaching.
Yeah.
And my husband has been adamant about what I do know where I am at and how that can serve others and how that can help others, because just like you said, these are the things that I needed help with when I started. And if I can pass them down to the next person in line to make their life a little easier and speed the process up a little more for them, then that's what I can do. I don't have to be, it's not a destination, it's a journey, right? So, So I love that you're creating this.
I think along with that, my thing has always been put something out there and then you can change it. You know, progress over perfection. It does not need to be perfect. Put it out there and then you can tweak it, you know? So there's like an introductory price right now for our Entrepreneur Hot Seat, because I'm probably going to have to change parts of it and it's not going to be perfect. So let's start where we start and then we'll edit it and make it better. But everything needs to just start before you can even, you know, make it perfect, because it needs to start somewhere.
Yep. I love that. So tell people the Facebook page where they can find the information for this.
So you can search the Golden Rule Boutique. So we're doing it under the umbrella of the store. Okay. And it's called Entrepreneur Hot Seat, and we're going to be adding more, but we have 2 up so far. So you can find them under our events.
Okay. All right. I'll put that in the show notes. And then let's plug your podcast so that people can learn more about fair trade from other boutique owners, business owners, people involved in the fair trade industry.
Perfect. Yeah. The podcast is at the Fairlosophy podcast. So and then FAIRLOSOPHY podcast is on Instagram. And then you can search that on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. This has been super, super enlightening. You have packed so much information into one episode. I know that my listeners are going to love this, and hopefully they'll become customers of yours.
Yeah, I love that. I'd also like to gift your listeners a coupon code for the website. So the website is www.fairlosophy.com. thegoldenruleboutique.com. And if you use the coupon code POWER15, you can get 15% off.
Sweet. I am definitely going to check that out and look to see what kind of goodies I can get. You guys have already checked her boutique out. You're going to love what she has to offer. And anyone listening to this, anyone who's been here with me for a minute, know that I super support any type of product that gives back and makes an impact in the world and is doing good. And I think that more of us that support these types of mission is when we're going to start seeing like true change in the world. Absolutely. So go use your discount, get you something cool. And thanks, Jackie, for hopping on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh man, you guys, my favorite part about this show is the amazing women that I get to meet every single week. I love hearing their stories, and I love bringing their stories to you guys. I certainly hope that you're inspired to go out and lead your own purpose-filled lives after listening to these guests week in and week out. If you are inspired by something you've heard in the show, can I ask a favor? Can you go please write a review, make sure you're subscribed to the podcast, give us a rating. We'll take 5 stars if you're feeling generous. And then tell all your friends about us so that we can continue to bring you these guests. And by the way, are you hanging out with us on Instagram? Because you should be. It's at @the_power project. Check us out. As always, I hope that you enjoyed this show, and I cannot wait to chat with you next week. But until then, you guys go out and lead your best purpose-filled lives.